The Galactic Council chambers had seen many historic moments across its 10,000-year history, but none quite like this. Ambassador Zektar of the Vrelian Empire stood at the central podium, his four arms gesticulating wildly as he addressed the assembled representatives of 300 species. His chitinous exoskeleton gleamed under the chamber's artificial lights, and his compound eyes reflected the holographic displays showing star charts and battle formations. Honored delegates, Zektar's translator crackled, converting his clicking speech into the common tongue. We stand at a crossroads that will determine the very survival of our galactic civilization. For millennia, we have lived by one sacred law, one commandment that has kept peace among the stars: never challenge the humans. A ripple of nervous energy passed through the chamber. Representatives from dozens of species shifted uncomfortably in their specialized seating arrangements. The Aquarian delegates, floating in their water-filled observation spheres, released streams of worried bubbles. The crystalline Zephyrians chimed softly among themselves, their harmonic communications creating an underlying melody of anxiety. Zektar continued, his voice rising with passion. But I ask you why? Why should we, the legitimate heirs to this galaxy, cower before a species barely 3 centuries old in space? They number fewer than 12 billion across all their worlds. We, the combined might of the Galactic Council, represent over 4 trillion sentient beings across 10,000 systems. Yet we live in fear of these upstart mammals. High Counselor Tefesra, the ancient serpentine leader whose species had ruled star systems when Earth was still covered in ice, raised one of her 6-fingered hands. Her scaled face showed the wisdom and weariness of her 800 years of life. Young Zektar, she said, her voice carrying the weight of authority, you speak of things you do not understand. The law exists for reasons that predate your species' ascension to the stars. Enlighten us then, High Counselor, Zektar challenged, his mandibles clicking aggressively. Tell us of these mythical human capabilities that have kept our mighty fleets in check for 300 years. Are they gods? Do they wield magic? Or are we simply cowards who have allowed ourselves to be intimidated by clever propaganda? The chamber erupted in a cacophony of sounds, growls, clicks, harmonics, and electronic translations, all competing for attention. Some delegates supported Zektar's bold words, having grown tired of the restrictions placed on their expansion and military activities due to human-controlled space. Others, particularly the older species, seemed horrified at the very suggestion of challenging the established order. Tifis slammed her ceremonial staff against the floor, the sharp crack echoing through the chamber and demanding silence. Very well, she said slowly. Perhaps it is time the younger species learned why their elders chose wisdom over pride. She activated the chamber's central holographic display, and suddenly, the space above their heads filled with star maps dating back thousands of years. The law was not created out of fear, she began, but out of respect born from terrible experience. Let me tell you of the time before the law, when the galaxy learned what humans truly are beneath their seemingly peaceful exterior. The star map shifted, showing the expansion of various species across the galaxy over millennia. When we first encountered humanity, they had just developed faster-than-light travel. Crude, inefficient ships that could barely cross a single star system. We thought them charming, these bipedal creatures with their simple technology and naive optimism. The hegemony of that era, my own ancestors among them, decided they would make excellent subjects for uplift and integration. The map zoomed in on a small section of space near the galaxy's rim. First contact was made at their colony of New Geneva, a simple mining world with perhaps 50,000 humans. The hegemony fleet that arrived was modest by our standards, merely 200 vessels with a standard complement of pacification systems. The plan was straightforward: demonstrate our superior technology, demand submission, and begin the integration process. A new image appeared, a blue-green world orbiting a yellow star. The humans did something we had never encountered in all our centuries of expansion. When faced with overwhelming force and certain defeat, they did not surrender. They did not negotiate. They did not flee. Tifa's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. They smiled and said, "Come and take it." Young delegates throughout the chamber leaned forward, captivated despite themselves. Even Zektar's aggressive posture had shifted to one of attention. What followed, Tifa's continued, defied all our understanding of warfare, of survival, of rational thought itself. The humans of New Geneva had no military fleet, no orbital defenses, no weapons capable of threatening our ships. They had mining equipment, civilian shuttles, and determination that burned like a star going nova. The hologram shifted to show tactical displays of the battle. They converted their mining explosives into orbital mines, using their cargo shuttles as delivery systems. Suicide runs, we called them. Each shuttle that approached our fleet contained not just explosives, but volunteers who sang their planetary anthem as they guided their vessels into our hulls. The chamber fell silent except for the soft humming of life support systems. But this was only the beginning. As our forces landed on the planet's surface, we discovered that every human settlement had been converted into a fortress. Every civilian had been trained in combat. Every child over the age of 12 carried weapons that, while primitive by our standards, were wielded with deadly precision. She paused, her ancient eyes reflecting memories that still haunted her species' collective consciousness. They fought us in their cities, in their minds, in tunnels they had carved through solid rock. When we destroyed their power systems, they fought by torchlight. When we poisoned their water, they drank their own recycled waste. When we bombarded their food production facilities, they ate tree bark and each other, if necessary. A crystalline delegate chimed nervously. Surely they could not hold out long against a proper hegemony force? They held for 14 standard months, Tifa's replied. 14 months of fighting for every meter of ground, every tunnel, every building. We lost 60,000 troops, taking a world of 50,000 humans. But it was not the casualty ratio that broke the hegemony commander spirits. It was the realization that the humans were not fighting to win. They were fighting to make conquest so costly that we would never attempt it again. The star map expanded again, showing communication lines branching out from New Geneva to dozens of other systems. Every day of those 14 months, the humans of New Geneva transmitted detailed reports of our tactics, our weapons, our weaknesses. Every death they suffered was documented and broadcast across their network. They were not just fighting for their own world. They were creating a manual for how to hurt us, how to make us bleed, how to make us pay a price we had never been asked to pay before. Zektar's voice was noticeably quieter when he spoke. What happened when the world finally fell? Oh, young Zektar, Professor said with something that might have been a smile on her serpentine features. The world never fell. We left. The chamber erupted again, this time in gasps of amazement and disbelief. Impossible, someone shouted. 200 ships against a single world of primitives. We had achieved our military objectives. Tifa's continued calmly. We controlled the orbital space, the primary cities, the industrial centers. By any tactical measure, we had won. But the humans kept fighting, and every day we remained, our casualties mounted. Every supply ship we sent was attacked. Every patrol was ambushed. Every night, our troops slept knowing they might not see morning. She gestured to the star map, which now showed human space expanding rapidly outward from Earth. More troubling was the intelligence we gathered about human preparations. While we were bogged down on New Geneva, every other human world was preparing for our arrival. They had taken the lessons transmitted from their dying colony and improved upon them. Weapons were being manufactured, tactics refined, alliances formed with the few species willing to trade with them. The hologram shifted to show projected casualty figures and resource expenditure calculations. Our military analysts presented a simple conclusion. We could take every human world, but The cost would be the effective destruction of our own civilization. The humans would not surrender, would not submit, would not break. They would fight until the last human child drew breath, and they would take as many of us with them as possible. Counselor Vex of the Mechanical Collective, his cybernetic voice resonating through multiple frequencies, spoke up. So the hegemony simply retreated, abandoned their expansion. We negotiated, THYSS era corrected. The humans, through their representatives, offered us a deal. They would recognize hegemony's sovereignty over the territory we already controlled. They would establish trade relationships and cultural exchanges. They would even provide military assistance against external threats, all in exchange for one simple condition. She paused dramatically. Leave human space alone. Forever. No colonization attempts, no forced integration, no demands for tribute or submission. Respect the borders of human civilization, and humans would respect ours. The chamber was silent except for the soft whirring of translation equipment. The hegemony leadership, being rational beings who could calculate costs and benefits, accepted. Within 5 years, we discovered it was the best decision we had ever made. Human technology, while primitive in some areas, was revolutionary in others. Their medical advances alone extended the average lifespan of hegemony citizens by 30%. Their manufacturing techniques reduced production costs by half while increasing quality. Their entertainment media became so popular that it nearly replaced our own cultural products. Zektar's posture had changed completely. Where before he had stood proud and aggressive, now he seemed smaller, uncertain. But surely this was centuries ago. Humans today cannot be the same as those ancient warriors. That, Tessera said with genuine sadness in her voice, is where you are wrong, young delegate. What we learned in subsequent centuries was that New Geneva was not an aberration. It was not a world of exceptional warriors or fanatics. It was a typical human colony populated by miners and their families, farmers and shopkeepers, engineers and teachers. She gestured to a new display showing human expansion across the galaxy. Every human world that has ever been threatened has responded identically. When the Devourers swept in from the Galactic Rim 50 years ago, consuming everything in their path, 3 human agricultural worlds stood directly in their invasion route. Those worlds held for 18 months against creatures that had previously overwhelmed entire star systems in weeks. The display showed battle footage, humans in environmental suits fighting insectoid creatures 3 times their size in the vacuum of space, using jury-rigged weapons, and civilian vehicles converted into combat platforms. When a Phantom fleet began raiding shipping lanes near the Centauri cluster, human merchant vessels started traveling in armed convoys. Not military escorts, civilian freighter crews who had welded weapons to their cargo ships and taught themselves to fight. The Phantom fleet abandoned that entire sector after losing a third of their ships to what they called suicidal merchants. More images flashed by. Human explorers fighting off hostile wildlife on distant worlds. Human scientists continuing their research even as alien diseases ravaged their bodies. Human diplomats standing firm against threats that had intimidated species with 1,000,000 years of civilization. The truth, Counselor Zektar, is that humans are not peaceful because they lack the ability to wage war. They are peaceful because they understand the true cost of war better than any species in the galaxy. They have looked into the abyss of total conflict and chosen to step back from its edge. But when forced to fight, when their survival or the survival of their allies is threatened, they become something that defies every model of behavior we have developed for sentient species. She turned off the holographic displays, leaving the chamber in the softer light of the overhead illumination. The law exists not to protect humans from us, but to protect us from humans. It ensures that this remarkable species continues to develop, to trade, to share their innovations and culture with the rest of the galaxy. It ensures that we never again have to face the choice between total war and total submission. The silence stretched for long moments before Zektar finally spoke again, his earlier bravado completely absent. "High Counselor, I had no idea. Our historical records focused only on human technological and cultural achievements, not their military actions." "Because," Teachwisisura replied gently, "the humans themselves prefer it that way. They take no pride in their capacity for violence. They celebrate their artists and scientists, their explorers and philosophers. They build monuments to peace and cooperation, not to conquest and domination. But that does not make them weak, it makes them wise." Ambassador Felthera of the Oceanic Confederation, her blue-scaled features troubled, raised a question that many were thinking. "But, High Counselor, what if the circumstances change? What if humanity's nature evolves? What if future generations lack the restraint of their ancestors?" It was a fair question, one that had been debated in the Council's closed sessions for decades. That, Teachwisisura admitted, is a risk we monitor constantly. We maintain embassies on every major human world, cultural exchange programs, joint research initiatives. We watch not for signs of military buildup. Humans have always maintained strong defenses, but for changes in their fundamental character. She activated one final display, showing recent cultural data from human worlds. What we see continues to reassure us. Human children are still taught that violence is a last resort. Their leaders still seek diplomatic solutions to conflicts. Their literature and entertainment still celebrates cooperation over domination. They have not become complacent or arrogant despite their technological and territorial growth. Counselor Vex's mechanical voice carried a note of curiosity. What about younger human generations? Do they share their ancestors' warrior spirit? "Oh yes," Tikazura said with what was definitely a smile now. "Just last year, a human research station in the Void Sector was attacked by raiders seeking to steal their experimental technology. The research station had no military defenses and no combat-trained personnel. It was staffed entirely by graduate students and junior scientists, most barely out of their adolescence." She paused for effect. "Those students held off a fleet of 20 raider ships for 6 days using improvised weapons and laboratory equipment. They converted their particle accelerator into a point defense system, turned their atmospheric processors into chemical weapon dispensers, and used their research drones as guided missiles. When the human military finally arrived, they found the raiders in full retreat, having lost 8 ships to what they thought would be a defenseless target." The chamber erupted in amazed chatter at this news. "The most remarkable part," Teachwisisura continued, "was that when interviewed afterward, the students expressed no pride in their military success. They were upset that 6 days of research had been lost and worried about the environmental damage to their study sites. They had fought like demons to protect their work, not for glory or conquest, but because they had a job to do and raiders were interfering with it." As the session began to wind down, delegates throughout the chamber were deep in conversation, reassessing everything they thought they knew about humanity and galactic politics. Zektar approached the podium once more, his entire demeanor transformed. "High Counselor, I formally withdraw my proposal to challenge human territorial claims. However, I wonder, given humanity's remarkable capabilities, why do we not seek closer alliance? Surely with human military support, the Council could expand our influence, bring order to the chaotic Rim territories." The ancient Serpentine leader looked at him with something approaching pity. "Young Zektar," she said softly, "you still do not understand. Humans do not fight for expansion or influence. They fight for survival, for protection of their own, and their allies for principles they hold sacred. Try to use them as weapons of conquest, and you will discover that their greatest fury is reserved not for those who attack them, but for those who would corrupt their nature for selfish ends." As the session officially ended and delegates began filing out of the chamber, conversations continued in dozens of languages and communication methods. The younger species were clearly shaken by what they had learned, while the older ones seemed relieved that the truth was finally spoken openly. In the weeks that followed, the Council's intelligence services would report a significant decrease in anti-human sentiment among member species. Trade requests with human worlds increased by 40%. Applications for cultural exchange programs tripled. But in the deepest archives of the Council, in files accessible only to the highest levels of leadership, other reports were also filed. Reports tracking human technological development, monitoring their expansion patterns, noting changes in their cultural expressions and political structures. Because while the law protected both humans and aliens from unnecessary conflict, those who enforced it understood a fundamental truth. Humanity's greatest strength was also their greatest potential threat. A species that would fight to the last breath for principles could, if those principles were ever corrupted or redirected, become an unstoppable force of destruction. The law would remain in place not just out of respect, but out of necessity. For the galaxy had learned that there were some forces too dangerous to provoke, some sleeping giants best left undisturbed. And in their comfortable worlds scattered across human space, 12 billion humans continued their daily lives, mostly unaware that their simple existence was considered both the galaxy's greatest asset and its most carefully watched potential threat. The oldest law of the galaxy would endure, as it must, for the protection of all. Captain Sarah Chan stood on the observation deck of the UES Harmony, watching the swirling nebula known as the Dragon's Breath paint spectacular colors across the viewport. As the commanding officer of humanity's newest exploration vessel, she had seen many wonders in her 15 years of service, but the beauty of unexplored space never failed to move her. The ship hummed quietly around her, its fusion drives propelling them toward their next survey target, a system the Galactic Council had marked as uninhabitable and of no interest. That designation had immediately caught the attention of the Human Exploration Service. In their 3 centuries of space travel, humans had learned that uninhabitable often meant challenging, and of no interest usually meant we didn't look hard enough. The bridge comm crackled to life. "Captain, we're receiving a priority transmission from Council Station Epsilon. It's marked urgent and classified." Sarah frowned. Council communications were usually routine diplomatic exchanges or trade negotiations. Urgent and classified was unusual. "Patch it through to my quarters, Lieutenant. I'll take it privately." In the privacy of her cabin, Sarah activated the secure communications array. The holographic projector flickered to life, revealing the imposing figure of High Counselor Tetris Sura. Sarah had met the ancient Serpentine leader only once before, during her promotion ceremony 5 years ago, but the alien's reputation for wisdom and caution was legendary throughout human space. "Captain Chun," Tetris began without preamble, her scaled features showing unusual stress. "I am transmitting this message in violation of several council protocols because circumstances require immediate human attention. 3 days ago, a member species called the Krillian hegemony formally challenged the territorial integrity of human space." Sarah felt her blood chill. She had studied the history of the law during her military training, understanding its importance not just to human security, but to galactic stability. "High Counselor, with respect, I thought such challenges were impossible under Council Charter." "They are," Teacher replied grimly. "The Krillians have invoked an ancient emergency provision that allows for territorial disputes if a member species can demonstrate legitimate territorial claims predating current boundaries. They claim the human colonies in the Vale sector were built on worlds that once belonged to their ancestors." The Vale sector, Sarah knew it well. It contained 12 human worlds, including New Terra, with a combined population of nearly 200 million. Agricultural worlds, mostly feeding the inner colonies and trading surplus to alien markets. "Captain, there's more. The Krillians are not acting alone. They have formed what they call the Ancient Territories Alliance, 7 species, all claiming that human expansion has encroached on their ancestral domains. Together, they represent nearly 50 billion sentient beings and one of the largest military forces in the galaxy. Sarah's mind raced through the implications. What does the Council intend to do? Officially, we must allow the legal process to proceed. A tribunal will be convened, evidence will be presented, and a decision will be rendered according to Council law. This process could take years. Teacheress Sarah paused, her ancient eyes reflecting deep concern. Unofficially, I fear this is a coordinated attempt to test human resolve and discover whether the old warnings about your species remain valid. And if we resist the legal proceedings, then you would be in violation of Council law, and the Alliance would have justification for military action against what they would label rebel human colonies. The High Counselor leaned forward, her voice dropping to nearly a whisper. Captain, I have reason to believe this entire situation has been orchestrated by forces that want to provoke exactly that response. Someone wants to see humans fight. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. For 3 centuries, humanity had maintained peace through strength held in reserve, through the unspoken understanding that attacking humans would cost more than any victory could be worth. But if humans violated galactic law, that protection would be stripped away. What can we do? The tribunal process allows for what the Council calls cultural demonstration. Each species may present evidence not just of their historical claims, but of their current nature and intentions. It is meant to help judges understand the context of territorial disputes. Teacher's expression was unreadable. Captain, I am unofficially suggesting that humanity should participate fully in this process. Sarah understood immediately. The High Counselor was warning them without explicitly violating her neutrality as a Council leader. The Alliance wanted to provoke humans into a military response that would justify larger aggression. Instead, humanity needed to remind the galaxy why the law existed in the first place. How long do we have? The preliminary hearings begin in 6 standard weeks. The main tribunal will convene in 4 months. Captain, I'm also transmitting the current fleet positions of Alliance forces. For informational purposes only, you understand. After the transmission ended, Sarah stared at the star charts showing the deployment of Alliance ships. It was clearly a war footing. Fleets positioned not for defense, but for rapid strike capabilities against human worlds. The Krillians and their allies were not planning to wait for legal victory. They were positioning for military conquest regardless of the tribunal's decision. She activated the ship's intercom. All department heads to the briefing room immediately. Mr. Kim, set course for Earth. Maximum sustainable velocity. The next few hours were a blur of planning and communication. The UES Harmony was equipped with the latest quantum communication array, allowing real-time conversation with Earth across hundreds of light years. Within 6 hours of receiving Tevisisura's warning, Sarah found herself in direct communication with Admiral Rodriguez, the head of Human Defense Command. Captain Shun, the Admiral's weathered face showed the strain of managing an impossible situation. What's your assessment of Counselor Tevisisura's intelligence? I believe it's accurate, sir. The fleet positions make it clear this is a coordinated military operation disguised as legal proceedings. The Alliance intends to provoke us into actions that will justify invasion. Agreed. We're implementing Protocol 7 immediately. All civilian populations in the Vale sector are being offered evacuation to inner colonies, but so far only about 15% are accepting. The rest insist they're staying to defend their homes. Sarah wasn't surprised. Human colonists were typically people who had chosen difficult lives on frontier worlds because they valued independence and self-determination above safety. Asking them to abandon their homes was like asking them to stop breathing. What about military response, Admiral? We're walking a very tight line, Captain. We're reinforcing defensive positions on all potentially threatened worlds, but we cannot be seen as preparing for offensive action. Every ship movement, every weapons deployment, every training exercise is being monitored by both Alliance intelligence and Council observers. The Admiral's expression grew even more serious. Captain, I'm assigning the Harmony a special mission. You're going to represent humanity at the tribunal proceedings. Your ship will carry our cultural delegation and serve as a mobile embassy during the entire process. Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. Sir, I'm an exploration captain, not a diplomat. Exactly why you're perfect for this job, Captain. You embody what humanity has become. Curious, peaceful, always seeking to understand rather than to conquer. But you're also a ship commander who knows how to make hard decisions under pressure. Admiral Rodriguez smiled grimly. Besides, Captain, you won't be alone. We're putting together the finest team of representatives humanity can offer. Over the next 3 weeks, as the Harmony made its way to the Council core systems, Sarah watched her ship transform into something unprecedented in human naval history. The cargo bays were converted into cultural exhibition spaces, filled with art, music, literature, and scientific achievement from across human space. The crew quarters were reconfigured to accommodate nearly 50 civilians, historians, artists, scientists, philosophers, and even children chosen to represent humanity's diverse nature. Among the delegation was Dr. James Okoro, the elderly historian who had written the definitive account of the New Geneva incident. His presence alone sent a message. Humanity remembered its history and was prepared to discuss it openly. There was also Maria Santos, the young artist whose sculptures had won acclaim even among alien critics, and Professor Lin Wei, whose agricultural innovations had helped feed half the galaxy's civilizations. But the most unusual addition to the delegation was Tommy Morrison, a 12-year-old student from the agricultural world of Haven's Rest in the disputed Vale sector. When Tommy learned that his world might be taken from humanity, he had written a letter to Earth requesting permission to speak for his home. The letter had somehow made its way to Admiral Rodriguez's desk, and the Admiral had decided that sometimes the most powerful voices were the smallest ones. As they approached Council Core, Sarah called the delegation together for their final briefing. The converted cargo bay had been transformed into a meeting space that somehow managed to feel both formal and homely, distinctly human in its ability to blend functionality with comfort. Ladies and gentlemen, Sarah began, we all understand what we're facing. This tribunal is not really about territorial claims or ancient rights. It's about whether the galaxy still believes that humans are too dangerous to provoke. Dr. Okoro, his aged face serious but determined, spoke up. Captain, I've been studying the Alliance species' histories and motivations. What concerns me is that they seem to genuinely believe that modern humans have become soft, that our peaceful nature over the past century indicates weakness rather than strength. Then, we'll have to show them otherwise, Maria Santos said quietly. Not through threats or demonstrations of military power, but by showing them who we really are. Young Tommy Morrison, looking small among the adults, but radiating determination that reminded Sarah of every human colonial child she'd ever met, raised his hand. Captain, are we going to fight? It was the question everyone was thinking, but hadn't wanted to ask directly. Sarah considered her answer carefully. Tommy, humans don't fight because we want to. We fight because sometimes it's the only way to protect the things we love. Right now, we're going to try every other option first. We're going to show the galaxy that humans prefer peace, but that we've never forgotten how to defend ourselves when peace isn't enough. The boy nodded solemnly, seemingly satisfied with her honesty. Professor Lin Wei had been studying the Alliance's territorial claims in detail. Captain, there's something troubling about these supposed ancient territories. The geological and archaeological evidence they've presented has some significant inconsistencies. I don't think these claims are entirely legitimate. Explain. The Krillians claim their ancestors inhabited the Vale sector 12,000 years ago, but the fossil record shows no evidence of advanced civilization during that period. The atmospheric composition data they've provided doesn't match what we know about planetary development in that region. She paused, checking her notes. I think someone has fabricated or manipulated their evidence. Dr. Okoro leaned forward with interest. If that's true, it supports Counselor Kaiser's theory that this is orchestrated provocation rather than legitimate territorial dispute. But who would benefit from provoking a conflict between humans and the Alliance? It was a question that would haunt Sarah throughout the remainder of their journey to Council Core. Someone with significant resources and political influence had convinced 7 species to risk everything on challenging humanity. Someone wanted to see what would happen when humans were forced to fight again. As the Harmony entered the Council Core system, Sarah stood once again on the observation deck, but this time the view offered no comfort. The massive space station that served as the galaxy's political center was surrounded by hundreds of ships representing dozens of species. Alliance vessels were grouped together in what could only be described as a battle formation, while ships from neutral species maintained careful distances. Most troubling of all were the ships that didn't belong to any known faction, sleek vessels with unfamiliar designs that seemed to be watching the proceedings from the system's outer edges. Sarah had ordered her tactical officer to scan them discreetly, but the results had been inconclusive. Whoever they were, they had technology advanced enough to mask their true capabilities. "Captain," her communications officer reported, "we're being hailed by Council Station Command. They're requesting permission to assign an escort squadron to the Harmony during our stay." Sarah's instincts told her that accepting an escort would make them look weak, like humans needed protection from other council members. But refusing might be seen as arrogant or provocative. Request clarification on the purpose of the escort. Is it ceremonial, protective, or regulatory? The response came back quickly. Council Command reports that all ships carrying tribunal participants are being assigned escorts as a standard security measure. No implications regarding specific threats or concerns. Then, we'll accept graciously. Signal our appreciation for Council courtesy and security measures. As the Harmony docked with Council Core Station, Sarah felt the weight of 3 centuries of human history resting on her shoulders. Whatever happened in the coming weeks would determine not just the fate of 12 human worlds, but the future relationship between humanity and the galaxy. The tribunal would begin in 3 days. Sarah had that long to prepare her species' case for peaceful coexistence with neighbors who seemed determined to prove that humans were either weakened by peace or still too dangerous to allow expansion. Looking out at the assembled ships and thinking of the 200 million humans whose lives hung in the balance, Sarah Chun made a promise to herself. She would show the galaxy that humans had lost none of their strength in learning to love peace, but that their greatest strength had always been their refusal to surrender what they valued most. The real challenge would be demonstrating that truth without having to prove it through violence. As the airlock cycled and the human delegation prepared to enter Council Core Station, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a carefully laid trap. But humans had faced traps before, and they had always found ways to turn disadvantage into victory. This time would be no different. It couldn't be, too much depended on it. The ancient law of the galaxy was about to be tested in ways it had never been tested before. And humanity would either emerge stronger than ever, or they would remind the galaxy exactly why that law existed in the first place. The tribunal awaited, and with it, the future of human civilization among the stars. The Grand Tribunal Chamber of Council Core Station had been built to accommodate the largest gatherings in galactic history, but even its vast space felt cramped with the representatives of over 200 species present for the proceedings. Captain Sarah Chan stood at the human delegation's assigned area, watching as delegates filed into their species-specific seating arrangements. The chamber's architecture was a marvel of engineering, with atmospheric zones, gravity fields, and environmental controls allowing beings from hundreds of different worlds to share the same space. At the center of the chamber, the Tribunal of 7 sat in judgment. Each member represented a different class of civilization: ancient, modern, technological, biological, energy-based, collective consciousness, and synthetic intelligence. Their combined wisdom and authority was considered beyond question in matters of galactic law. The proceedings began with the traditional invocation, spoken in the harmonic frequencies that could be understood by all sentient species regardless of their communication methods. Sarah felt the subtle vibrations through the station's hull, the same frequencies that had opened important gatherings for over 8,000 years. Tribune Veltar of the Ancient Collective, a being so old that its crystalline form had grown translucent with age, spoke first. This tribunal convenes to hear the matter of territorial claims in the region designated as the Vale Sector, disputed between the human colonies established therein and the Ancient Territories Alliance, representing prior claims to said region. The Chamber's translation systems worked seamlessly, converting the tribune's crystalline resonances into understandable speech for every delegate present. The Alliance will present their claims first, followed by the human response, and then both parties will be allowed cultural demonstration periods to provide context for their positions. General Kexthor of the Krillian hegemony rose to present the Alliance case. He was an impressive figure even by alien standards, 3 meters tall, with 4 arms, each ending in razor-sharp claws, and compound eyes that could track multiple targets simultaneously. His species had evolved as apex predators on a world where only the strongest survived, and their culture reflected that heritage. Honored tribunals, Kexthor began, his translator converting his clicks and growls into formal speech. The Alliance presents evidence of clear territorial violations by human expansion. The worlds in question, 12 planets in what humans call the Vale Sector, were inhabited by our ancestors for millennia before human arrival. Holographic displays activated throughout the chamber, showing star charts, archaeological data, and what appear to be ruins on several worlds. Sarah studied the evidence carefully, noting the inconsistencies Professor Lin Wei had identified during their journey. These worlds bear the marks of Krillian, Vorthak, Zelani, and for other Alliance species civilizations. Sacred burial grounds, ancient cities, technological remnants, all predating human presence by thousands of years. Kexthor's voice carried the righteous anger of someone defending ancestral homes. The humans arrived 3 centuries ago and simply took these worlds without regard for prior claims or sacred significance. The evidence was impressive if taken at face value. Detailed archaeological surveys, atmospheric analysis showing ancient industrial activity, even what appear to be genetic markers in soil samples indicating long-term habitation by various Alliance species. Tribune Veltar's voice resonated through the chamber. Are there other considerations the Alliance wishes to present? General Kexthor's posture shifted slightly, and Sarah sensed they were approaching the heart of the matter. Honored tribunals, the Alliance also questions whether humanity retains the characteristics that led to their special protected status under galactic law. A ripple of nervous energy passed through the chamber. Several alien delegates shifted uncomfortably, and Sarah noticed that many of the older species representatives were watching the humans with particular attention. We submit that 3 centuries of peace and prosperity have fundamentally changed human nature. The fierce warriors described in ancient records no longer exist. Modern humans have become soft, dependent on technology and diplomacy rather than the strength that once made them formidable. Kexthor's compound eyes fixed on the human delegation. If humans can no longer defend their claims through the trials that originally established them, then those claims should be subject to standard territorial law rather than the special protections they have enjoyed. The chamber fell silent. Sarah realized that this was the real purpose of the tribunal, not to adjudicate territorial claims, but to test whether humans had lost the edge that made the law necessary for galactic peace. Tribune Mordan of the Modern Species Council spoke for the first time. The tribunal recognizes that this raises questions beyond simple territorial dispute. However, we must first address the primary claims before considering secondary implications. Sarah stepped forward when the tribune indicated it was time for the human response. She had spent days preparing for this moment, knowing that her words would be analyzed by every intelligence agency in the galaxy. Honored tribunals, distinguished delegates, the human delegation thanks the tribunal for the opportunity to respond to these claims. Her voice carried clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. We must first address the archaeological evidence presented by the Alliance. She activated her own holographic displays, showing detailed analysis of the same worlds the Alliance claimed. Our scientists have conducted thorough examination of the Alliance evidence, and we have discovered significant inconsistencies that suggest deliberate falsification. The chamber erupted in surprise chatter. Accusations of evidence tampering were serious matters in council proceedings. Professor Lin Wei stepped forward, her scholarly demeanor commanding immediate attention. Distinguished delegates, the geological data presented by the Alliance shows atmospheric compositions that are impossible given the known stellar evolution of the Veil sector's primary stars. The supposed ancient industrial activity would have required atmospheric conditions that could not have existed during the time period claimed. She gestured to detailed chemical analyses scrolling through the holographic displays. Furthermore, the genetic markers allegedly indicating Alliance species habitation show contamination patterns consistent with recent introduction rather than ancient presence. The isotope ratios in the supposed archaeological sites are wrong for artifacts of the claimed age. General Kex Thor's aggressive posture suggested he was about to challenge her findings, but Professor Lin Wei continued smoothly. Most tellingly, the ruins themselves show tool marks for modern equipment. Microscopic analysis reveals cutting patterns that could only have been made with industrial fabrication technology developed within the last 50 years. She paused for effect. These sites are not ancient archaeological treasures. They are recently constructed forgeries. The chamber dissolved into chaos as delegates shouted questions, accusations, and demands for further investigation. Sarah watched the Alliance delegation carefully, noting that while General Kex Thor maintained his aggressive stance, several other Alliance representatives looked genuinely surprised by the revelations. Tribune Veltar's harmonic resonance cut through the noise, demanding silence. The tribunal will note these challenges to the evidence and require independent verification before proceeding. However, the secondary question raised by the Alliance requires immediate attention. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. Here it came, the real test. The question before us is not merely territorial, but fundamental to galactic order. The special considerations given to human expansion have always been based on their demonstrated capabilities and nature. If that nature has changed, then the legal framework governing human relations with other species must be reconsidered. Tribune Xera of the technological hegemony, a being whose cybernetic enhancements allowed direct interface with the station's computer systems, added her voice. The cultural demonstration period will therefore focus on this question. Do modern humans retain the characteristics that originally established their unique status under galactic law? Sarah looked back at her delegation, seeing determination in every face. Dr. Okoro nodded encouragingly. Maria Santos offered a supportive smile, and young Tommy Morrison gave her a thumbs up that seemed absurdly human in this gathering of alien beings. The human delegation respectfully accepts the tribunal's framework and requests permission to begin our cultural demonstration immediately. Tribune Veltar's approval resonated through the chamber. Permission granted. The humans may proceed. Sarah had spent weeks planning this moment, but now that it had arrived, she found herself departing from her prepared remarks. Something about the way the Alliance delegates were watching, like predators studying prey, told her that conventional diplomacy would not be enough. Honor tribunals. To understand modern humanity, you must first understand that we have never forgotten our history. Dr. James Okoro, please tell the tribunal about New Geneva. The elderly historian stepped forward, his aged voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence. Distinguished delegates, New Geneva was not the first human colony to face overwhelming force, nor was it the last. It was simply the first time other species witnessed what humans become when everything they value is threatened. He activated historical records that many delegates had seen before, but his commentary provided context that transformed their meaning. The miners and farmers of New Geneva were not professional soldiers. They were people who had chosen difficult lives on a frontier world because they valued independence above safety. When faced with conquest, they did not calculate odds or consider surrender terms. They asked themselves a simple question: what price are we willing to pay to remain free? The holographic displays showed the 14-month siege from multiple perspectives: hegemony military records, human colonial archives, and intercepted communications from both sides. The answer, Dr. Okoro continued, was everything. Every human on New Geneva understood that their sacrifice might not save their own world, but it might save other human worlds. They fought not just for themselves, but for the principle that humans choose their own fate. Sarah watched the alien delegates as Dr. Okoro spoke, noting the varying reactions. Some species seemed horrified by the human willingness to sacrifice everything for abstract principles, while others appeared to respect such dedication. That spirit, Dr. Okoro said, his voice growing stronger, has never left humanity. It has been refined, channeled into peaceful pursuits, expressed through art and science and exploration rather than warfare. But it remains the core of what we are. Tribune Mordan's technological voice cut through the chamber. But has this spirit been tested in recent generations? Can modern humans still access this willingness to sacrifice for principle? Sarah smiled because she had hoped someone would ask exactly that question. Tommy Morrison, would you please join me? The 12-year-old boy stepped forward, looking small among the towering alien beings, but showing no fear. His presence alone made a statement. Humans trusted their children enough to bring them into the galaxy's most important political gathering. Tommy, Sarah said gently, would you tell the tribunal about your letter? The boy looked up at the assembled delegates, his young voice carrying the matter-of-fact tone that children use when stating obvious truths. When I heard that strangers wanted to take my world away from my family, I got angry. Not scared, angry. Because my mom and dad work really hard to grow food that feeds people all over the galaxy, and my little sister was just born there, and all my friends live there. He paused, gathering his thoughts. So I wrote to Earth and asked if I could come here and tell everyone that they can't have our world. The simplicity of his statement created profound silence in the chamber. Tommy, Tribune Veltar's crystalline voice was gentler than Sarah had heard it. What if these beings took your world despite your objections? What would you do? The boy's answer came without hesitation. I'd fight them. My dad taught me to fight, and my mom taught me to think, and my teachers taught me that some things are worth fighting for. If someone tries to take our home, we'll make them sorry they tried. Even if you couldn't win? Tribune Mordan asked. Especially if we couldn't win, Tommy replied with the absolute certainty that only children possess. Because if we fight hard enough, maybe they'll decide it's not worth trying to take other people's homes. The chamber remained silent as the implications of a 12-year-old child's words sank in. This was not the product of military training or political indoctrination. This was a natural response of a human child to the threat of injustice. Maria Santos stepped forward next, her artistic sensibilities bringing a different perspective to the cultural demonstration. Honored delegates, I would like to show you something that represents modern human nature. She activated a holographic display that filled the chamber with images of art from across human space, sculptures that captured the beauty of alien worlds, music that incorporated harmonics from dozens of species traditions, literature that explored the challenges of interspecies cooperation. This is what humans create when we are not threatened. We make beauty, we tell stories, we explore ideas. We take inspiration from every species we meet and create something new that honors both our differences and our common hopes. Her voice carried the passion of someone describing her life's work. But this same creative spirit, this refusal to accept limitations, this drive to imagine something better, This is also what made the defenders of New Geneva hold out for 14 months against impossible odds. She gestured to a particular sculpture that seemed to capture starlight in crystalline formations. The same human trait that drives us to create art, that moves beings across the galaxy to tears, is the trait that drove colonial farmers to turn their mining equipment into weapons. We do not separate our capacity for beauty from our capacity for resistance. They are the same thing. Professor Linway added the scientific perspective that completed the demonstration. Human nature is not divided into peaceful and warlike aspects. We are a species that asks, what if, and then commits everything to making our answer reality. When we ask, what if we could grow crops on this barren world? We terraform planets. When we ask, what if we could understand alien psychology? We spend decades learning to think like other species. And when we ask, what if we refuse to surrender our freedom? We fight until the stars burn out. Sarah watched the Alliance delegation carefully as her team presented their case. General Kex Thor maintained his aggressive posture, but she could see uncertainty creeping into the expressions of other Alliance representatives. They had expected to face either weakened humans who would capitulate to superior force or aggressive humans who would validate their claims of territorial expansion. Instead, they were confronting something more complex and therefore more dangerous. Humans who were both peaceful and utterly uncompromising about their core principles. Tribune X Sarah's cybernetic voice carried a note of calculation. The tribunal recognizes that the cultural demonstration has provided context for human claims. However, demonstration and reality are not always identical. How can the tribunal verify that modern humans retain the capabilities that establish their unique status? The question Sarah had been dreading and anticipating in equal measure had finally been asked directly. How do you prove your species' capacity for violence without actually committing violence? She looked back at her delegation one more time, seeing nods of support and encouragement. Then, she turned to address the tribunal with words that would either secure humanity's place in the galaxy or destroy everything her species had built among the stars. Honored tribunals, she began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to propose. Humans believe that the best proof of strength is never having to use it. But if proof is required, we are prepared to provide it. The chamber held its breath as Sarah Chun, speaking for all of humanity, made an offer that would change the course of galactic history. We propose a demonstration that will answer all questions about human nature once and for all. The silence that followed Captain Sarah Chan's announcement stretched across the Grand Tribunal chamber like a held breath. Every delegate, every observer, every being present understood that they were witnessing a moment that would define galactic relations for generations to come. Sarah could feel the weight of expectation pressing down on her from all sides. The hope of human delegates behind her, the skeptical attention of the Alliance, the careful neutrality of the Tribunal, and the watchful eyes of species throughout the galaxy. Tribune Veltar's crystalline form resonated with harmonics that the translation systems rendered as careful inquiry. Captain Chun, the tribunal would hear the details of this demonstration you propose. Sarah had hoped to avoid this moment, but the Alliance's challenge had made it inevitable. Humanity would have to prove its nature through action rather than words, and the proof would have to be undeniable. Honored tribunals, the human delegation proposes a practical test. Select any Alliance military force of significant size and capability. Give them a target, one of the disputed worlds in the Veil sector. Allow them to attempt conquest under standard galactic warfare protocols. She paused, letting the implications sink in. Humanity will defend with only the civilian population and standard colonial equipment available on that world. The chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates shouted questions and objections in dozens of languages and communication methods. The Alliance delegation looked stunned. They had expected political maneuvering or diplomatic concessions, not an offer of actual combat. General Kexthor was the first to recover from his surprise, rising to his full, imposing height. This is madness. The humans proposed to sacrifice an entire colony to prove a point. No, Sarah replied calmly, her voice cutting through the noise. We propose to demonstrate that human colonies cannot be taken by force, regardless of the odds. The sacrifice would be yours, not ours. Tribune Mordan's technological voice carried notes of concern. Captain Shun, the tribunal cannot sanction what amounts to a military assault on civilian populations. The ethical implications alone. With respect, Tribune Mordan, we are not proposing an assault on civilians. We are proposing a test of military capability against a prepared defense. The difference is crucial. Dr. Okoro stepped forward, his historian's perspective adding weight to Sarah's proposal. Every human colony in the Vale sector has been preparing for potential attack since the Alliance first made their claims. The populations have been trained, equipment has been distributed, defenses have been prepared. They are not helpless civilians. They are citizen soldiers ready to defend their homes. Young Tommy Morrison, still standing near the human delegation area, spoke up with the directness that only children possess. We've been practicing for months. Everyone on Haven's Rest knows how to fight now. My little sister can field strip a pulse rifle, and she's only 6 years old. His casual statement sent another ripple of shock through the chamber. The image of human children learning military tactics as easily as they learn mathematics was deeply disturbing to species that separated civilian and military populations. Tribune Xera's cybernetic analysis systems were clearly working at full capacity, processing the implications of humanity's offer. The proposal presents several concerns. First, the potential for actual casualties among sentient beings. Second, the precedent it would set for resolving disputes through combat. Third, the possibility that failure by either side could destabilize galactic relations. Sarah had anticipated these objections. Honored Tribune, we propose several safeguards. First, the engagement would be monitored by Council observers and could be halted at any time if casualties exceeded predetermined limits. Second, this would not be establishing a precedent for dispute resolution. It would be resolving the specific question of human nature that underlies this territorial claim. Third, we believe success by either side would actually stabilize relations by establishing clear understanding of capabilities and intentions. General Kexthor's aggressive posture had returned, his predatory instincts responding to what he saw as an opportunity. The Krillian hegemony accepts this proposal. We will demonstrate that human weakness is real and that your ancient reputation is based on myth rather than reality. No, the voice that interrupted came from an unexpected source. Admiral Thexera of the Vorthak Star Navy, one of the other Alliance members. The amphibian being's tone carried deep concern. This proposal is strategically unsound. If the humans are certain enough of their capabilities to make such an offer, we should consider why they are so confident. Tribune Veltar's resonance carried a note of agreement. Admiral Taxararizas important considerations. Captain Shun, why are you confident that civilian populations can resist trained military forces? Sarah smiled, because this was the question she had hoped someone would ask. Because, Honored Tribune, you are operating under a fundamental misunderstanding of human nature. You assume that there is a difference between human civilians and human military personnel. There is not. She activated holographic displays showing recent footage from human worlds, farmers operating complex machinery, children learning advanced technical skills, elderly citizens participating in community defense drills. Every human colony exists on what we call a frontier. Even our most developed worlds face challenges that would destroy other species' civilizations. Hostile weather, dangerous wildlife, equipment failures that could kill entire populations if not handled correctly. The images showed humans of all ages working together to overcome various crises. We do not survive by having specialists handle dangerous situations for us. We survive by ensuring that every human, regardless of age or occupation, can handle dangerous situations. Professor Lin Wei added supporting data. Psychological analysis shows that humans respond to existential threats by becoming more capable, not less. Stress and danger do not weaken human performance. They focus it. A human farmer defending his family fights with the same intensity as a professional soldier, because from the human perspective, there is no difference between those roles. Dr. Okoro provided historical context. This is why New Geneva was able to resist for 14 months. It was not an unusually militaristic colony or populated by professional warriors. It was a typical human settlement where every resident understood that their survival depended on their ability to adapt, learn, and fight when necessary. Admiral Thexera's concern was becoming more pronounced. General Kex Thor, I strongly advise against accepting this challenge. The humans would not make such an offer unless they were certain of the outcome. But General Kex Thor's pride and predatory instincts have been challenged, and backing down now would be seen as admitting weakness. The Krillian hegemony has conquered 17 star systems. We have never been defeated by any species. We will not be intimidated by human propaganda and psychological warfare. Tribune Veltar attempted to restore order to the proceedings. The tribunal recognizes that the human proposal addresses the core question raised by the Alliance challenge. However, the practical and ethical complications require careful consideration. Sarah realized that the tribunal was looking for a way to avoid sanctioning actual combat, while still resolving the fundamental question. She decided to offer them an alternative. Honor tribunals. If concerns about casualties and precedent make a full military demonstration problematic, we propose a modified test. Select a single Alliance ship, the most advanced and capable vessel they possess. Give it a specific military objective on any human world of the tribunal's choosing. Allow that ship to attempt its mission using any tactics and weapons deemed appropriate by galactic warfare conventions. The proposal was audacious in its simplicity, one ship against an entire world. The human population of that world will attempt to prevent the mission's success using only resources and personnel available on planet. No human military vessels, no orbital defenses beyond what civilian infrastructure can provide, no outside support. Sarah's voice carried absolute confidence. If the Alliance ship succeeds in its mission, the Alliance territorial claims will be validated and humanity will accept the loss of the Veil sector. If the human population prevents mission success, the Alliance will withdraw their claims and acknowledge that human nature remains unchanged. General Kex Thor's compound eyes were fixed on Sarah with laser intensity. One ship against an entire world? You mock our capabilities. Choose your best ship, General. Your most advanced technology, your most experienced crew, your most achievable military objective. The only restriction is that the objective must be something that can be accomplished by a single vessel. Destroy a specific facility, capture particular resources, eliminate designated targets. Nothing that would require a full invasion fleet. The Alliance delegation went into hurried conference, their various species representatives communicating in rapid bursts of their native languages. Sarah could see the division among them. Some, like Admiral Thexera, clearly thought this was a trap, while others, following General Kex Thor's lead, saw it as an opportunity to humiliate humanity with minimal risk. Tribune Xera's analysis systems had been processing the proposal for several minutes. The modified demonstration addresses many of the Tribunal's concerns about casualties and precedent. A single ship engagement would allow precise monitoring and control. The objectives could be limited to military targets with minimal civilian impact. But, Tribune Mordan interjected, the fundamental question remains, why are the humans so confident? What advantages do they believe they possess that would allow a planetary population to defeat advanced military technology? Tommy Morrison answered before any of the adults could respond. Because it's our home. You can't know our home as well as we do. You can't want to protect it as much as we do. And you can't think of as many ways to fight for it because you've never had to live there. His simple explanation cut through all the sophisticated political and military analysis to the heart of human defensive psychology. The chamber fell silent as delegates contemplated the implications of what the boy had said. Dr. Okoro expanded on Tommy's insight. Human colonies are not just population centers. They are integrated survival systems. Every human colonist understands their world's geography, weather patterns, industrial capabilities, and resource distribution better than any outside force could learn in months of study. More importantly, every colonist has spent years solving problems and overcoming challenges specific to their environment. Maria Santos added the cultural perspective. Human art, music, and literature from frontier worlds consistently focus on themes of adaptation, resilience, and creative problem-solving under pressure. These are not just cultural values. They're survival skills that every human develops from childhood. Professor Lin Wei provided the scientific analysis. Human brain chemistry responds to threats against their community by enhancing cooperation, creativity, and risk tolerance. Neurological studies show that humans defending their homes display cognitive performance levels 30 to 40% above baseline, while simultaneously showing decreased fear responses and increased pain tolerance. Sarah watched the Alliance delegation as her team laid out the scientific and cultural foundations of human defensive capabilities. She could see understanding dawning in some of their faces. They were beginning to realize that they had fundamentally misunderstood what they were challenging. Admiral Thexera made one final attempt to dissuade his allies. General Kex Thor, I have studied human military history extensively. They have never offered a challenge they cannot win. This proposal should be seen as a warning, not an opportunity. But General Kex Thor's pride had been challenged before the entire galaxy, and his species' warrior culture would not allow him to back down. The Krillian hegemony accepts the human challenge. We will select the objective and the world. We will demonstrate that human reputation exceeds human reality. Tribune Veltar's resonance carried notes of reluctance and inevitability. The tribunal recognizes that this demonstration may be necessary to resolve the fundamental questions raised by this territorial dispute. However, we require detailed protocols for monitoring, intervention, and casualty limitation. Sarah nodded agreement. The human delegation accepts all reasonable safeguards and monitoring. We propose that the demonstration take place in 30 days, allowing time for preparation and protocol development. Agreed, General Kex Thor said immediately. 30 days will be sufficient to select our vessel and objective. The humans will learn that their ancient reputation has become a liability rather than an asset. As the tribunal session adjourned and delegates began filing out of the chamber, Sarah found herself surrounded by her human delegation. The weight of what she had just committed to was beginning to sink in. Captain, Dr. Okoro said quietly, I hope you know what you're doing. We've just bet the future of human space on the outcome of a single engagement. I know exactly what I'm doing, Dr. Okoro. We're giving the galaxy a reminder of why the law exists. She looked around at her team, scientists, artists, historians, and a 12-year-old boy who had spoken truth that seasoned diplomats could not refute. And we're showing them that humans choose their own fate, no matter the odds. As news of the demonstration agreement spread throughout Council Core Station and across the galaxy, reaction was swift and divided. Some species applauded humanity's courage, while others questioned their sanity. Military analysts began calculating odds and probabilities. Political scientists debated the precedent being set. But on 12 human worlds in the Vale sector, the news was received with grim satisfaction and immediate preparation. The farmers and miners, teachers and shopkeepers, engineers, and children of the frontier worlds began final preparations for a test that would determine not just their own fate, but the future relationship between humanity and the galaxy. The oldest law of the galaxy, never challenge the humans, was about to be tested in the most direct way possible. In 30 days, the galaxy would discover whether human nature had changed, or whether some things remained constant across the centuries. General Kexthor was about to learn why wise species chose to respect, rather than test, the sleeping giant of human civilization. And Captain Sarah Chun had ensured that the lesson would be remembered for generations to come. The demonstration would begin in 30 days. But for humanity, the real demonstration had been taking place for 3 centuries. It was called peaceful coexistence with neighbors who were about to discover that humanity's greatest strength was their refusal to abandon the principles that made them who they were. The galaxy was about to witness what humans became when everything they valued was threatened. Some lessons, Sarah reflected, could only be taught through experience. In 30 days, class would begin.